Welcome to Voices Against Violence, a Harmony House podcast to educate, empower, and serve as a voice for survivors. We aim to shed light on crucial issues surrounding domestic violence, offer support, and inspire action for change. Join us as we work together to create a community where all individuals can live a life free of abuse. I'm Charity Jordan-Rex, Prevention Program Manager for Harmony House.
I'm Kirstyn Walker, Assistant Executive Director of Harmony House. Charity, March is Women's History Month, and I think there is a lot to talk about when it comes to gender stereotypes and the role they play in domestic violence or intimate partner violence.
Absolutely. This is another topic that I have a giant soapbox. I'm feeling like I have a lot more soapboxes maybe than I acknowledge, but because consent is one. We just did that one.
You're a deeply passionate person.
I am.
You've got a lot to say. Thank goodness there's a microphone in front of you. Let's capture.
I just happen to have a microphone. Yeah. So March is Women's History Month, and I just want to say right off the top, because I feel like I can just hear the devil's advocates out there. Why do we need a Women's History Month? Because so much of history is centered around men.
Sure.
And let's just be clear that women are 50% of the population. And they have made incredible, phenomenal achievements and accomplishments and are full humans and valuable members of our society. So let's take some time to acknowledge.
100%. I can also hear devil's advocate or comments in the chat saying domestic violence does not only happen to women. We know. we are aware.
1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 men. Yeah. We are here for everyone.
Harmony House serves all individuals. So we are aware of that, and we cannot ignore the way that gender stereotypes do impact and influence this conversation around domestic violence. So let's talk through stereotypes, I guess, in general, just starting with like a stereotype is like fill in the blank. How would you define a stereotype?
Well, to me, a stereotype is kind of a generally common accepted idea about a certain demographic.
Yeah.
So with women, I think one is that women they're meek and mild and quiet and nice.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd agree with your definition that it's like a generalized component, like a generalized thinking of a type of group, but how they should behave, act, show up, whatever it might be.
And not a correct idea.
No.
But just a general
concept of how this person ought to behave, ought to look like, ought to dress. So I used to do an activity with young people where I would ask them write on the board gender stereotypes about women, gender stereotypes about men, and I'd ask them to fill in the blanks, like how ought this person look, dress, act, behave, whatever. And it was always chaos. It was just it was not varied room or school to school. Every school said the same thing about how a woman and how a man ought to dress, behave, act.
Okay. Tell us, what are some of the things they said?
Okay. So, women are, just all the things that you hear, all the things that we know aren't true. So things, they don't like sports, or they're bad at sports.
They're bad at math.
They're bad at math and science. They don't like outdoor stuff. They wear dresses and makeup, and they care about their hair and their, like all of those things that we hear all of the time. And then like for men, it was that men like sports, or men pay for the dates, or that men are more powerful or stronger, or the really interesting stuff was when I started asking about occupation. And so they'd say like the men are the boss, or they're the leaders, and then, women are secretaries or teachers. The one that I was so fascinated by, I had a group of 6th graders, and we were going through like occupations, and they put doctor on the women's side. And I said, say more, because that is not what I was expecting. I was not expecting that their gender stereotype was that women are doctors. I was expecting them to say that men were doctors and that women were nurses.
That is so curious.
And so I was so curious about it. I was like, say more. And all of the kids in the class were saying like, well, my doctor has always been a woman. And then I was like, it kind of was a light bulb moment for me of, a young person is seeing a pediatrician. And there's a gender stereotype within the healthcare realm that if you are a woman studying medicine, you're going to be a pediatrician. And so then I was like, oh, that's even interesting. They are tapping into a gender stereotype that they probably don't even recognize as being something that exists because they're not in the healthcare field.
Yeah.
But no, so it was really interesting. It was a great exercise to get to look at the board and look at all of these expectations that are held of men and women and ask ourselves, like, where do these come from? These aren't accurate. This doesn't represent every woman I know. This doesn't represent every man I know. And what kind of pressure does it put on to us when we're expected to fit this mold that doesn't feel right for us? It's not real for us. Maybe we don't like that particular thing. We don't excel at that particular hobby. How does it feel when somebody expects us to? And so it was a really great conversation and dialogue with young people about that. But it is so interesting how deeply ingrained these beliefs are.
Yes.
Because I don't remember anyone sitting me down and teaching me like, oh, this is what a woman ought to do. This is what a man ought to do.
Yeah.
And yet it's in there.
It's in there because no one has to tell a young person, this is what we think and believe about women. They just have to watch
any show,
watch what happens, watch, who are you interacting with? How are you talking about women? Where do they see women in different jobs? And those messages just become internalized.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They do. It's any storyline, any punchline, any conversation, any kind of like typical joke. It's all in there. And when we talk about how people ought to be or how they should or should not behave, it does put a set of expectations. And in some instances, folks will use those expectations to justify power and control over their partner. And that's really where we're talking about today, is like the intersection of where these gender stereotypes overlap with domestic violence.
So let's connect those dots for folks who are like, well, how does a gender stereotype, how is that harming women? Like how is that connected to domestic violence?
Yeah. So when we look at the different types of abuse, right? So one that just immediately comes to mind is financial abuse. When we consider the gender stereotypes, the narratives we believe about a man's role around finances in the family, is it setting up a system in which a male partner could use power and control to keep their spouse away from the finances, to not give them information about finances, to not allow them to work because they shouldn't be working. They should be taking care of the home or children or whatever it might be, right? So like all of those things that we would recognize as financial abuse, is it rooted in this belief that that's the way it's supposed to be?
So while you were talking, there is a website and they had a link on their site, are you biased against women leaders? Take the test. So I clicked on that link and then it pulls up this page and it says this page is missing just like 18% of women's pay. But, but I think that's a really good way to kind of help connect these ideas. So like financial abuse is severe. It keeps women in dangerous, life-threatening situations. But part of that comes from this idea that women's work is worth less. Women are the caregivers generally. And those jobs that are typically have traditionally been done by women are low paying, low benefit jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. And the financial abuse, that's just one of the components that we could look at this, right? So if we remember the fact that domestic violence centers around power and control, it would benefit us to look at the ways that stereotypes set up power and control in relationships. Yes. And so if one partner is seen to be as superior or more dominant, all of the words that I would see written on the whiteboard of what we believe to be true about men, then it sets up a system where it justifies control. So someone's telling you where you can and can't go, what you can and can't wear, what you can and can't do, because they are the more powerful or more dominant one in that relationship.
So what I hear you saying, Kirstyn, is that these systems we're moving within and that govern so many aspects of our society are themselves rooted in power and control.
Yeah.
And who leads those systems?
And you know who else those systems harm? Men.
Yes. Okay. I just feel like we can't say this enough. So we're talking about women, but there are men who experience domestic violence, but it's those same gender stereotypes that keep men from coming forward a lot of times and getting the help and support to get out of their unsafe situation. So men, you are also harmed by this.
So you mentioned the fact, 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 men. And so, but statistically, we know that men are less likely to report abuse. And it's because of those feelings of having to be strong, not being able to be weak or ask for help that keep men specifically from seeking support. So it's really harmful any way you look at it. These ideas that people ought to be a certain way.
So I'm looking at oxfam.org. They have a page and they have listed 10 social norms that drive violence against women and girls. So domestic violence doesn't just come out of nowhere. Like that, I feel like those are the leaves on the trees. And so we're talking about what's at the root, right? And so I feel like these are some of the ideas that are at the root of that. So number one, women must be submissive to male family members in all aspects of her life. How does that idea of women being submissive contribute to gender-based violence?
Yeah. Man, it's the idea that somebody would have the right to control a partner and that the other person, in this case, a woman, has to be submissive to their will because of their gender it's just so rooted in our history and everything we like in our language. And it's this like undercurrent that cuts through. I think sometimes when I have these conversations, people are like, it's 2026. Like, this isn't a problem today, or like, this isn't an issue anymore. But when you have built a foundation of a society and a culture that is built on this, it's the undercurrent, it's the tone that all of our systems are built on.
But these ideas still exist. I went into a group with teens and we were talking about social norms and they're like, what's a social norm? And I was like, well, tell me, how is a relationship between a boy and a girl supposed to be? Oh, the guy's supposed to be the one in control. He's supposed to be dominant. There you go. There's a social norm. Yeah. So if you're going to deny someone else's humanity just based on their gender,
right,
as somehow being less, and then someone else has more power and control, I mean, it sets up an environment where abuse and harm is likely because one person has power, the other doesn't. One person is worth more, the other one is worth less.
Right.
And once you begin to remove people, separate them from their humanity, we can objectify them.
Violence becomes so much easier against somebody when you don't see them as a human. When you see them as inherently less valuable, it's so much easier to commit acts of violence against them.
I think we can look at events throughout history where regimes have done this.
Yes.
Where they have systematically put out propaganda that characterized people as less than human, actual caricatures as animals or other things. So once you can begin to dehumanize someone, it becomes so much easier to harm that person. Okay, number 2, men are expected to exercise coercive control. So, I feel like a lot of this harkens back to really some traditional ideas about marriage and family, some of those based in religion, but not always. that men are supposed to be the head of the household. And if that's the way you want to set up your family, that's fine. But the caveat there is that only works if you have a healthy relationship.
If all parties are in agreement about expectations and no person has control over the other to say this is the way it's going to be. I like the point that you made there, like that. If that works for you, right? Like we would look at that board, those young people, and I would look at the board and be like, if you are a young man who loves football and loves, video games and all the things that were on the board about you, if you love that, cool, love that, be that, do that. But if you're not, right, the problem comes into play when somebody uses power or control to fit you into that mold when that's not who you are or what you want.
I mean, again, I just think of the denying someone's humanity, and women have just as much right to their humanity, to take up space, to have a voice as anyone else. So I'm not going to go through the whole list, but this other one I feel like is a good one to talk about. Sexual harassment is normal. I feel like this is like, oh, it's just a joke. I saw a post recently that said when sexual harassment happens, men like to say, well, it's not all men. Okay, not all men made the joke, but some men made the joke. Other men stood there and listened. Some men laughed. Some men said, oh, you're being too sensitive. So like, you may not be the actual perpetrator, but still your actions had the same effect.
That's a good question, I think, for all listeners is, are we challenging these systems when given the opportunity? Are we challenging gender stereotypes when we hear them in real life? Are we challenging sexual harassment when we hear it in real life? Are we asking, saying that joke wasn't funny, or just saying nothing at all, right? Like that can be a very effective tool too, to not laugh, which sends the message that's not funny to me.
Absolutely.
So one thing that I do think that is important also to bring into this conversation is that culture is ever changing. And we have conversations in ways today that we did not have them 10 years ago. And so I just would challenge us all. We get to shape the culture. I mean, if we look back to gender stereotypes across history, one really simple one is that blue used to be for little girls and pink used to be for little boys. And then that changed over time. And so we have the ability to shape how we talk about gender and how we talk about expectations and stereotypes. And so I just would challenge our listeners today, are we taking that opportunity to shape the culture that we want to see when it comes to how we talk about these things?
I think my challenge would be to question what you believe. Why do you believe what you believe?
Where does that come from? Yeah.
Where does it come from? Get curious, as you say all the time. Get curious. Like, is this based in fact? Or is this like just some opinion, something that has formed over the years, So something that I have said, and I'm realizing now I don't have to say this hardly at all ever, but two boys growing up, well, there are no girl and boy toys. There are no girl and boy books. There are no girl and boy color, it's just, there are colors. I heard someone say, oh, that's a girl instrument. No, there's no such thing as girl instruments. There are just instruments.
What was the instrument?
A clarinet.
Okay.
And
I had no fathom of what that could possibly be. Okay.
You mean you didn't automatically hear girl instrument?
I did not. No.
And what's so funny is that I've got a friend whose husband plays the clarinet, and we were talking about that, and he was like, what? Yeah. Like, the most prominent clarinetists are men. And I think that's what he plays and made a career of.
That's so funny.
So I feel like that, again, we talk about having these conversations with young people.
Yeah.
But it can be just as simple as that. Like, no, that's not a thing.
Yeah. Examining and dismantling your own beliefs around gender and just gender stereotypes. Where do those things come from? And how are we continuing to perpetuate them?
Women experience violence because they are dressed provocatively. Oops. So this idea that women somehow are responsible for the harm that other people are doing to them because of what they are saying, doing, wearing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a no. That's victim blaming. Nobody is responsible for somebody enacting violence against them. There is nothing that someone could do that would make somebody act violently against them, including the way they dress.
What I love about things like this, I love to point out the inconsistencies. Like, I've never heard anyone say to someone who maybe like had someone break into their house, like, well, why'd you put your front door right front and center there? Like, you were just asking for it. Like, we only say these kinds of things about things that impact women. And it's not true.
There's a really powerful display called What I Was Wearing.
Yes.
And it's traveled the country and been reproduced in many spaces where survivors share what they were wearing during their assault. And it really drives home the fact that this is happening in all spaces, again, because of power and control, not because of what someone was wearing.
Mm-hmm. Like, I think one of those outfits was just like some grungy sweatpants.
Of course.
So you are not responsible for the harm that someone is doing to you. And we need to stop putting that onus on women. And we see that play out, girls can't wear tank tops at school because the boys are going to be distracted. No, boys are responsible. They're able, So if you're a parent and maybe that's in your child's student handbook or whatever, I don't know. I'd want to go have the conversation. Like, what is this? Yeah. That's not okay. Let's see. Girls are valued as wives, not as individuals.
We had this conversation yesterday.
Yes, we did.
We talked about how oftentimes the only opportunities to celebrate people are at weddings or like when somebody has a child. And we said, we should be celebrating each other more often than this. Mm-hmm. We accomplish pretty incredible things pretty frequently.
But that idea that somehow a woman's worth is wrapped up in whether or not she has gotten married and or whether or not she has had kids. And there's just so much language around that. I have not had my own kids, but my life has not missed anything. I have experienced all of the full aspects. We just put so much out there judging women like, oh, this is your real calling. Women are allowed to not get married, be single not have children. They're allowed to be focused on their careers. I just think, would you say this to a man? Would you say like, oh, you're not married yet. You haven't had kids. When you got, that's something we just put on women. I went to a Christian college and the joke was there like, oh, the girls were just there for their MRS degree. There was nothing like that. There's no equivalent.
No equivalent. That's such a good point, Sharon.
And I feel like that's another good way. What's the equivalent for guys? Often these derogatory jokes and comments, there's no equivalent for guys.
I went to a lecture once where they were talking about how to identify when somebody was being, when gender was the focus of an advertisement. And they said, if you could swap the model with a male model, would this pose and cost like attire look ridiculous? And if so, maybe what the ads focuses is gender and not actually the product that they're selling.
Yeah. I've never seen a commercial where the sex appeal made me want to go out and
buy a burger.
Like, I don't need that at all. This last one, I think, unfortunately, is still pretty true and relevant, or at least an idea that people hold. Divorced women have less value. There is a therapist I follow, and she's in her mid-50s, and she got divorced a couple years ago. And she's developed this huge following, but she talks about how to heal after at that stage of your life, getting divorced. But she will share the screenshots and things that she'll get from men. And there are so many that are like, who is ever going to want you as this older woman? Now you're divorced. You should have stayed married. And
yeah,
what? No, what?
It comes back to the idea that somebody's value comes from being married.
Your value is not inherent to you, but it is to the man that you're attached to. And that's just going to be wrong all day, every day. Women have 100% of their value and worth on their own.
Yeah.
They don't have to have a man. I bought a car recently, and one of the dealers, I didn't buy the car from this dealer, but they said to me, "Oh, well, your husband, no. My husband isn't buying this car. I am buying this car. I am financing this car. My name is the only one that's going to be on the title."
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I don't need a man to validate what I'm doing or my worth, and
are intrinsically valuable and worthy of respect, as is every human. And so, just keeping in mind, again, just to wrap up the idea of how gender stereotypes contribute to domestic violence. When we hold these stereotypes to be true, we are placing more value, more power on one particular set of people, and it sets up a system for folks to be harmed.
Mm-hmm. And I think, I love how you've been giving a challenge in these episodes. And I think I would love to challenge listeners this month to really be mindful of that, especially if you have young people, because I think we started this episode by saying you don't have to explicitly say, this is what we do and this is what we believe, but your girls, your boys, they are watching how you talk about these things, how you treat people, the jokes that you make, the shows that you watch, how you respond, how do you talk to the women in their lives. They are watching, and that is where they're learning this. And so I would just want to challenge everyone to be really mindful this month of, are we challenging those ideas? Yeah. Are we perpetuating them? And if you find like, ooh, I think I'm perpetuating that, like, get curious.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Why? Where did that come from? Is there a better way that I can say this or do this thing? Like, and honoring everyone's humanity equally.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Charity.
This was an amazing conversation. I'm so glad we did it. All individuals have a right to a life free of abuse. If you or someone you know needs help, please call our 24-hour hotline, 417-864-SAFE, 417-864-7233, or chat 24/7 with an advocate on our website at myharmonyhouse.org. Visit our website or follow us on our socials to stay up on the latest news and events. This is Voices Against Violence. Thanks for listening.